All right. So we're going to start today. Good morning. Um, this installment of our presentations is called Presenting to the C-Suite and Board of Directors. So what we're going to do is we're going to briefly describe what cybersecurity means in this context, and then we're going to jump right into how to present to the C-Suite and the importance of using a compliance platform. In this context, when we say cybersecurity, which it can mean a lot of different things, we're really talking about frameworks like NIST, CMMC, PCI, HIPAA, etc. Those frameworks are essentially a set of rules called controls, and those controls, we need to meet those controls in order to score or pass or get certified in those areas. So when we talk about cybersecurity, we're not talking about multi-factor authentication. We're not talking about all the little different, rabbit holes you could go down. We're referring to it as these controls that we're trying to meet uh, in order to become certified. That certification process sometimes has a score, and those scores or the passing or the certification of those items is contingent on you getting a contract or you moving through a vendor like Northrop Grumman or the Department of Defense, and being able to move through those environments and getting better and better contracts, more lucrative contracts, different contracts, are contingent on you getting passing those scores, getting those things completed inside of the control sets. And when you have a list of controls at that level, you're going to want to be able to report to your executive staff or your board of directors or your group how well you're doing in that area, how well you're doing on compliance in the sense that how well you meet all those controls. So if you have 95% of your controls completed, you're going to want to be able to articulate that to your team or to your manager, and then ultimately they're going to ask you to present something to the executives to show them where you stand, because you want to be able to say, okay, we're 95% done. Here's what we have done. Here's what we're working on now, and here's what we're going to work on in the future. And so you want to be able to present that to them. And so we're going to tell you how to do that here in this video, in this webinar. Some of the requirements that you are going to have, you can't meet them. And what you need to do is you need to articulate inside of a control what you would do in the event you needed to meet them. If, for instance, you had to use surveillance cameras on a particular area that had sensitive data locked behind that door, even though you maybe don't have that area because you don't use the sensitive data, if you don't complete the control, it'll be detrimental to you. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to say, if in the event that we do have a locked area, we would be using surveillance cameras of XYZ type. We would point that at that, and then we would follow these protocols, only allowing people who have access to that area into that area, etc., so that you can still meet the controls. So you can meet controls even though you don't have um, the capability to meet them. But if you do have the capability to meet them, if you do have an area where you can put cameras, then that you must do that. But if you don't, if one of the controls is how would you transport data from one location to the other, and you're like, well, I don't have data that I transport from one data area to the other, but you would want to say, here's how I would do it. And then when you have the controls completed, you're going to want to require evidence, or artifacts they're called, of the proof of that being completed. So you're going to want to show the evidence to some auditor or a third party or a body. But in this instance, you can also provide the ability for your executive team to see your evidence, and that in your documentation, your policies and procedures, they can dive deep which your VP of IT might do, or your IT director might do, or your IT, CISO might do, your CSSO. You can do that by using the Lionfish platform. The Lionfish platform allows you to um, have all of those controls at your fingertips. And when you have those controls, you can show them to your auditors, you can show them to your executive team, you can show them exactly what controls you've met, what controls you're working on, what it is that you have as artifacts and evidence. And so you can have the ability to give executives who are usually not super interested in a lot of detail, but you can, if you need to, give them access to this so that they can follow along with it if they want to know the status at a high level. Some of them do. Once they key in on a problem, like one of these controls is not being met, they'll watch it on a regular basis. They'll look at it and they'll hold you accountable for it. And it's hard to do that in an environment where you don't have any kind of a compliance tool in order to show them what was going on. So this is the Lionfish platform. It is a compliance tool. You can give your executives, auditors, teammates access to it so that they can view the progress of these particular controls, if they're met or not, what it is that the artifacts look like, so people can look at them, and then if they're part of your POAM. And your POAM is like your to-do list, your plan of action, what you're doing, what you've done in the past, and what you're going to do in the future. So how do you present to C-suites and boards of directors? You do this with a slideshow. You give them slides in order for them to digest the information. PowerPoint presentations, or Google, Google has a presenter, or whatever method you're going to use to produce these slides. You need to produce them for them and show that to them. That's how you do it. That's the most effective means, it seems, to catch the attention of executives. I guess this was born from the 80s when there were like massive slideshows that were going on, and people found that executives and board of directors seemed to enjoy slides more than they did, like, an individual presenting something or standing in front of the group, which used to be the old way of doing things. So slides are the way to go. There's a magic number of slides before you lose your audience's attention. You want to have a certain number of slides, like this slideshow, for instance. If this slideshow is 36 slides long, like halfway through, you might just doze off. Well, so what is the most effective number of slides for an executive? 1. It's not 6 or 12. It's 1. They want to see 1 slide with all the information on it that they can digest. So that's the most effective number. I've done this 1,000 times, and that is it. And there's a sub reason for that. Sometimes you are part of another group giving presentations at a board of director meeting, and they ask you for your slide. They'll say, "Can I get your presentation slide?" And it's just, they usually say slide. They never say slides, because they don't want you to hog up any time. They want your presentation to be just 1 slide that you talk about. So you want to pack as much information into a slide as you can. I'm going to have a slide example on the next one that we can look at to see that you can really pack an incredible amount of data into the slide. Now, do you want to pack an incredible amount of data into the slide? No, you just really want to point out, with good colors. I know this sounds strange, but you want to point out with colors what's going on. It's like these executives are children, because they seem to enjoy red, black, red, green, yellow. So if your particular issue is in red, they key in on that, and if it's in yellow, they'll key in on that a little bit as well. But they don't even look at the green items. They just look at what's red, and they want to know what's the problem, what's the issue, and they'll want to discuss that. So you can also hand out your poem as like a handout or a supplement to your slide. And your poem really is important because it discusses what you've done, when you did it, who was responsible for it, the priority of it, the risk, that kind of thing. Um, so your poem can just be a separate. You don't need to make that into a slide. I would send that separately to them and say, okay, here's the progress we're making. Now, another thing they love to see on the slide is risk. They love that. So if you have a particular issue, they want to know what is the risk of involved in that particular issue. So if we don't implement MFA, or if MFA doesn't get implemented here, what's the risk? And then you got to discuss that. You got to say, okay, the risk is, people who could, beat on our passwords and break in and become become you in an email and send email out to people as you, or infiltrate your email account or whatever. So you've got to be able to discuss the risk. So if you have a red item, you're going to want to say, okay, here's this red item, MFA. And then you're going to say, here's the completion time, responsible party. And you might put it red because it's behind schedule. And then they're going to say, well, what's the risk? So you might even as well just put it in there. And the next thing they want to know, they love to know, is if it fails, what are we going to do? So if you aren't able to implement multi-factor authentication, which would be hard, they want to know, well, what are we going to fall back on? How do we undo it? If you're rolling out multi-factor authentication to, 5 or 10 people or 1,000 people, it doesn't really matter. And like at 50% mark, it stops working, or the company goes out of business, which would be a more realistic thing that happens. Like the MFA provider goes out of business. They want to know, what are you going to do to back out of it? How are you going to back out of it? And what the timelines are for backing out of the problem. So you want to discuss that as well. So don't just say we're going to implement multi-factor authentication. You've got to go in there and say, well, what's the status of it? What color is it? Is it yellow? What is red, yellow, green? Okay, so green is that it's on target, it's going well, everything is the timelines are good, the responsible parties are there, everything is going well, it's a well humming machine. Yellow means that you see something that's potentially a problem. For instance, a good thing is like somebody's going on maternity leave for like 30 days, who owns the project, or an engineer quit. And so everyone else has to take on their load, or that was one of the projects that they were prime on, or the technology is deprecated, or like VMware just did. VMware just like deprecated a whole bunch of their products. So if you're using one of those, you're gonna want to say, oh man, there's yellow. This product could be end of life, or deprecated, or removed from their portfolio, and that would be bad for us. So yellow is that you're seeing with your experience something going wrong in the future. And red means that it's failed. You're failing. Either your failure is that usually because of your timeline. So you set your timeline to be like March 1st, and there's just no way it's going to happen on March 1st. So this is why the executives key in on it, because they're going to go, what are you going to do? What are the risks? That's the next question they're going to ask. And you're going to say, well, we're going to try to get a different MFA provider. We're working on a contract. It's going to take longer. And then they're like, well, what happens if we can't get MFA working? What are we going to do? And so that's how you back out of the changes. And so they're going to say that, and you're going to need to come up with that. So look at this slide. Yeah, it's got a lot of places to put stuff. This is just a sample. It's just, you look at all the stuff you can stick in here. This is a lot of data you can just jam in this slide. So like I said, there's colors here, blue. They like those colors. They like to see if your slide is just all one color, or it's all words, they're not going to like it. They want to see like graphical boxes and headers and colors and areas that have data in them. They want to see that. So they want to see something similar to this. Not exactly this, because this is just a slide that has it's just an example. But you can create a slide deck, or one slide actually, that has this, and this is just an executive summary template that I got from the internet, but it does everything I want it to do. It has the colors in it. It has titles. It has areas for putting data, these placeholder data items. Um, number one could be uh, your your status. Number two could be what's next, what's the hot item that's coming up next, and number three can be the number of risks that you are going to mitigate, or you talk about more risks somewhere else. You can also give like a summary of where your cybersecurity is. Like this 100% share would be like we're at 95%, or they like to see that like graphically shown to you in some sort of a method that you just don't put in one of the sentences that you're at 100% or 50%, or you call it out like in a graphical representation. They like to see graphics. They like to see arrows and colors. Like if you can see over here in the lower left-hand corner, this is a great place you can put a bunch of data with colors and arrows that point to progress. And they really, this slide is a great representation. And I really picked this slide because it has a ton of data in it. It it has a lot of information that you can jam in here. So if you're showing this PowerPoint to people, they can look around to find out what they're going to key in on, and then you can turn around and give all the answers you want to those questions. But this is the perfect example of a good PowerPoint slide that you're going to show. Now, what I would do is I would show this PowerPoint slide to like your boss or to another person in your company and ask them for their feedback, or show it to them and get some sort of like some criticism or whatever. Um, many times, 95% of the times that I've created these PowerPoint slides, I've been given feedback and it's been petty and like, weird, like the fonts. I've had to change fonts because they say, well, the executives don't appreciate this particular type of font. I know it sounds bizarre, but so there's these things that they love, and they'll give you these pieces of feedback. Take the feedback they give you because they probably present it to the executives themselves. If especially like an HR person or a legal person, those are the best people to go to because they'll give you good feedback, and you can say, okay, the font is weird, or the colors are strange, or they may even say there's too much data on the slide, which is fine. You can cut down on the amount of data you represent, but you can also then turn around and present a whole lot of data. But you also don't want to present data that's complicated. You want to really talk about, like we said before, timelines, priorities, items that are behind, risks. That's the language they talk in. If you try to say, look, we are trying to implement a firewall firmware upgrade, and we're running into trouble with, uh, the 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 firewall's RAM is filled with, we need to expand the RAM size of the firewall because we can't upload the firmware template inside. They don't want to hear that. That's crazy. So stay away from that kind of stuff. Don't say to them like all these technical details. They just want to know, is the firewall process moving forward? Is there risk if we don't implement the firewall upgrade? And what do we do if you try to upgrade the firewall and it fails to upgrade? What do we do? So you can answer those questions. You can say, we are going to possibly have to buy more additional module for that particular firewall, and then the upgrade for that is scheduled for X, or and if it doesn't work, we're going to possibly have to buy another firewall, and this is the cost of it, and that kind of thing. So those are the terms you need to discuss with them. Try to stay away from highly technical terms and just give them the skinny on the items in this presentation that I discussed previously. Okay, so I went to the FBI and I told them, here's the dangers of, I gave them a slide presentation. It wasn't one slide. It was like 20. But I was giving it to the FBI and all the FBI agents, and they all were sitting around. And so the first thing I did was I sent the slide deck to the FBI, my handler, and the handler looked at all the slides and gave me feedback. And the feedback is that you're going to scare these people, and there's no solution to any of these problems. I'm like, look, aggressive AI hacking robots are going to be, in the wild, attacking people with fake news, and it's gonna be able to. No, I just went on, 20 slides worth of doom and gloom. Like, here's your new frontier that you're going to be, in. And the FBI guy said, no, no, don't do this. This will scare everyone, and it'll make it so that everyone is hopeless about what's going to happen. He said, you have to come up with um, answers. You have to come up with some processes, or you have to calm people down. So if you go into your executive board meeting, you're all, here are the 25 red items. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What are we going to do? And if you don't have any solutions, if you go in there and you scare them, they're going to run. They're, fight or flight. They're going to run. The executives will always run. So they're going to say, what are we going to do? They're going to freak out and start coming up with ideas like replacing you, or adding more staff, or doing something strange. So you don't really want to go in there and scare them with your presentation. Your presentation should have, like I said, it should have the greens, and this is the reason why. You're saying to them, look, things are going well. Here are some slight hiccups with yellow. Here is a problem, maybe one or two with the red. And you want to present that to them and say, here's what, and here's what we're going to do about it. So I had to alter my presentation to include a section that calmed everyone down and said, okay, look, we have endpoint detection and response. We have, SIM. I had to give them reasons that the end of the world wasn't coming soon. So that's another reason to pass your presentation on to another person, but also be aware that you don't want to scare your audience. So you will do that if you don't include the greens and the yellows. Even you always will have greens, right? Because you've worked on a bunch of controls. So even if you're 25% done, you're going to have some greens. The 25% are going to be green. So you're going to want to include those. So you want to make sure that you are showing good signs, that there is progress being made. Because if you don't, you're going to scare them, and then they're going to go behind the scenes and try to solve the problems themselves without your collaboration. And I've seen it many times, dozens of times, where someone has presented doom, and everyone is overreacted, but they don't overreact in the meeting. They'll go after the meeting and they'll talk to the director of IT and say, okay, hire a security consultant who has more experience. That means fire whoever we currently have and get somebody else. So your presentations are very important, that you include green, yellow, red, and that you use the appropriate verbiage. You don't go technical on them. Another thing is, you want to prioritize what it is that you're going to work on. You want to make sure that everyone understands what the priority is, what the top priority is. So now here's a strange thing that may happen. You may have a red item that's just not going to meet and it might be in jeopardy, and you may have challenges with it. But an executive may see a yellow item and key in on it because they may know something about the yellow item, and they might want to show the other executives or the team that they're knowledgeable about what's going on. So they may key in on the yellow items. So you're going to want to make sure. And I've had this happen before where executives have shifted the priority away from the reds to the yellows. And they will do that in order to, to show, to stake their, to mark their territory. And that might not be the best possible priority that you need to, the yellows might not be the next best priority to go on. And they may want you need to steer them away from that. You need to say to them, it's great that you know this area and that you're an expert in it and that you can talk about it for days. But we need to, we need to go and handle some of these reds before we do that. And they may insist that you don't. And I mean, they're your bosses, so you have to follow along with what they say. But try to discourage somebody from marking their territory by picking a yellow that they know something about. Oh, I know all about cameras. I can talk to them about this. Oh, what about this? What about this? And then they'll go asking a bunch of questions at this meeting to try to do what's, they're going to try to put in their 2 cents in order to establish their value. So you can push against that a little bit, but again, all being said, they are your bosses, but you should try to stick to the priorities you discuss inside of your slide. All right, that's it. That's how to present to executives. All right. A little bit of a shorter class today, but it's very tight. Do you recommend building an executive template folder for these presentations? Absolutely. Everything should be compartmentalized in your cybersecurity folder. You should have presentations in there. You should have your policies and procedures in there. You should have templates for the presentation. You should have all these things, and only certain people should have access to them. Individuals who have access to your cybersecurity folder, but absolutely, these templates and presentations should be stored in an area, and you should have, and actually the executive should share it out with the executive so that they can see all of your presentations, all the past presentations, etc. Here's a situation where we don't really have something to give you other than the presentation what we've just given, because I've seen several things where they may limit the type of template you can use as a presentation template with your logo on it, or there's a splash page that every executive may want to see, and then they may even actually have color restrictions. I've seen some of the companies have color and font restrictions. As strange as it sounds, um, for presentations, they have particular preferences. I've had to go through and change fonts on maybe 6 or 7 prezos out of 1,000. So it does happen. It's rare, but it's something that you should be wary of, that you should want to go and say to somebody, how does my presentation look? And if it's not on target with what they're used to seeing, they're not gonna like it. Any other questions? Anybody want to raise their hand or put anything in the chat?
I have one quick thing. I came off mute real quick, Gregory. I think
you can get these templates for executive summaries on the internet. You can download them. There's some free template farms that have them. They're also, there's not a great selection of PowerPoint templates inside of PowerPoint for this type of thing. They're better on ones online you can get where it's PowerPoint friendly. You just drop it in there and you start modifying. Like I showed you that PowerPoint with the person standing in front of it. Those are great because you can the placeholders are editable. And you can just grab them. You can just download them. I have some that I use, but they're custom handmade for particular companies. So I tried to grab a template, but I ended up stripping out like half of it because it was proprietary knowledge. So it was kind of beat up, and I didn't think it was going to be the best thing to show you guys. So I just grabbed one from the internet, which is good because those are totally acceptable. All right, anybody else?
I've got a hand up if you can hear me, Gregory.
What was that?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
All right, let me lower my hand. I think the biggest thing that you gave us today was know your audience.
Yes.
So sometimes in presenting in front of executives, depending on if that meeting is just for you or if they have a full slate of items, you've got to know that.
Yes.
If you've got a limited amount of time, you probably want to have 1, 2, maybe 3 tops slides, with options for them to select from, including return on investment or cost avoidance, some of those things. And then if you want to have a 20 slide deck, then you can always say, and hey, the rest of the slides are available somewhere that they can get to and they can read the details. Because a lot of them are going to be very business focused. And to your point, Gregory, not technology focused. And they're looking at dollar cents. So I think that's a great point you brought up about making sure you know your audience.
Oh, absolutely. And not to scare your audience. You don't want to scare them. So you want to have some sort of solutions in there. You talked about money and you hinted at risk. They definitely key in on those terms. It's like they're it's like their gummies, their crack or whatever. They love that stuff. They want to see that. So again, you're right. If you have a 20 slide deck, you absolutely can make it available to them. If you're the sole presenter in a board meeting, which would be rare, yeah, maybe 3 slides, 2, 3 slides would be okay because you're there for 30 minutes and you're just going to sit there on one slide for 30 minutes. It's hard. But also, if you're going to be part of a group, then you're going to do the one slider because they're going to be powering through like a whole day worth of meetings with all the different departments so that nobody's going to ask you for more than one slide. They're going to say, where's your presentation slide? But yeah, absolutely. They love risk. They like costs. They like to know, but again, don't scare them. Don't make them frightened by, you have solutions for everything. All your reds, you should be able to explain them all. But you're totally right. But yeah, I've created large slide decks, but you don't want to show it to them. You just want to make it available to them. You're absolutely right. Anybody else have any other issues or questions or hand raisings? I don't see much. All right, well, I'm gonna end this meeting and then have everybody have a good weekend. I'm glad you came. It's good to see the attendance is still high. Thank you and have a great weekend.